Yeah, we are live now. So, welcome all participants to this session on climate risk and commercial banking. So, over to Tarunji to start the proceedings.
Good evening to one and all, and thank you for joining us in this webinar, which is being taken again after some gap due to the pandemic. Uh, we felt it necessary to start off on a very interesting topic, climate risk and commercial banking, which basically would sound a little, intriguing to a lot of us, wondering what we have with respect to climate risk and commercial banking. But believe me, I did some research and I found out that climate risks have such an impact on the financial stability of an economy that it can make or break if proper risk mitigation tools or risk management tools are not taken in and practiced. And within that, we have our speaker, Mr. Sridhar Kalyan Sundram, who would be taking this session. Before I introduce Mr. Sridhar to the participants, let me just take you through a brief overview of what Risk Management Association of India is and what are we doing and what do we intend to do over the course of time. So, Risk Management of Association of India was specifically formed as a platform for risk professionals, irrespective of the industry vertical where they uh, practiced. The idea was to share knowledge. The idea was to work on research and management with respect to risk management. The idea was to develop risk management as a serious subject across geographies, and we've been pretty successful where we've got a good number of members within India, Middle East, Southeast Asia. We are also evolving. Over the years, we've brought in two to three specific upskilling modules for risk management executives, a program or a course on reinsurance, and a certification on basics of risk management. We endeavor to bring in a series of webinars as well as learning sessions as well as new programs in collaboration, either as a standalone or in collaboration with institutes or with associations across Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa, and we hope to be continuing this programs on a regular basis. So, without much ado, I would like to now introduce you to Mr. Sridhar Kalyan Sundram. If I list out his credentials, it probably will take me about 5 minutes. But let me summarize Mr. Sridhar's experience. He's an experienced banker with about 3 decades of work within the banking industry, within India, Africa, and I believe he has done work around Middle East also. Now he's been an employee, he's been a management consultant, and he is a management consultant currently also uh, in the BFSI vertical, in the telecom vertical. He's probably handled the media industry also for his assignments, and again all within the MENA region, Middle East, Africa, including India. He's a very senior subject matter expert in the area of risk management, business process restructuring or re-engineering, IT service and risk management projects. He was associated as the chief risk officer with ESAF Small Finance Bank, based out of Thrissur, Kerala, and that's basically what Mr. Sridhar is and has been doing. He is a CISA certified professional. Also, he's a qualified banker, the CAIIB qualification, and a list of other qualifications, industry qualifications like the ISO 20000 and 27001. He is a Sigma expert, uh, and so he probably is the most ideal person to be speaking on climate risk and the banking sector, and how both these topics, which is intriguing, is correlated. Over to you, Mr. Sridhar, now for the session. And thank you so much for being accepting our invitation to take this program.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Good evening to everybody here. I see Mr. Wen Wu from Taipei. So I should say, good evening, sir. I'm thankful to you for taking time even so late into the evening. And all the other friends who signed up, thank you so much. And my primary thanks to Dr. Agarwal, the Secretary General of Risk Management Association of India, for this opportunity to reach out to you on this critical subject that's facing all of us. Probably we cannot unface it anymore. We have no option. So, and thank you, Mr. Tarun, for the lovely introduction. I hope to do justice to those beautiful words you said. So, with these few words of my own intro, I'd like to take you through a small presentation, which is more of a facilitation for discussion on what is climate risk. So therefore, we'll also be talking about what is not climate risk, because there are certain risks which will look identical, which will look, almost with similar impacts. And at the ground level, where we are either the managers of that event or those who are impacted by those events, sometimes we are both. So it looks, like this is already covered. So we'd like to discuss those and also find out how, from a commercial banking perspective, because that's the focus area today, what would be the requirement as a commercial banker we would need to do, because it is presumed that most of us here are in one way or the other connected to managing risks, either directly as purveyors of businesses where risks are there, or the intermediaries who help such purveyance, like are protected through insurance, protected through appropriate technology provisioning, in terms of database storage, so that alternate points of ability to deliver or whatever. All of those, are in one way or the other impacted by any impact arising out of such climate. Not only through a few things, but we'll also have those impacts. So we'll also talk about what is considered as climate risks and what is not considered as climate risks, which are, because there are many types of risks. So we'll look at a few references there. There'll be a lot of references to existing literature. The most ironic part of the existing literature is some of the literature themselves claim there is not enough literature. So obviously there's a lot of work for all of us to do globally, put the thought processes together and facilitate the sharing of that knowledge so that we can become better and better progressively. So with these few words, with your kind permission, I will go to my presentation. Give me a minute, please. Can you see my screen, Tarunji? Can I have a response?
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah, so thank you. So that I can, because I will lose, once I go to the full screen presentation, I tend to lose the visibility with the rest of the participants. So I see that you already sent out a message to everybody that we'll have the question and answer sessions at the back end of the presentation, so that it can be through chat. So welcome to the climate risks and commercial banking discussions as per agenda of today, right? Climate risk is basically risks arising out of influenced by climate changes. So climate changes, all of us know, excessive rainfall or lack of rainfall resulting in drought, dryness, extreme dry weather leading to forest fires, widespread fires, and so on and so forth. Now, these are not anything new from a risk management perspective, except that we are now trying to classify and categorize them into a required bucket. Why are we saying this? We are saying this because even from 2000, when we started our capital requirement, risk-based capital adequacies, and so on and so forth, what is commonly and popularly referred to as the Basel, guidelines, even from Basel 1 or even Basel 2, if you like, we have had the ability or the requirement to structure our loss events into certain quantified buckets so that we will be able to deal with them, possibly know the causes, and therefore the ability to counter such, actions would be driven by understanding the causes or even by categorizing them, so on and so forth. So floods per se, is nothing new. It's a damage to properties, your physical assets, or even your business disruptions and system, failure. These were categories where we used to bucket events arising or impacted by these sort of issues. But today, we're not talking about that. We're talking about where a flood is purely a climate-driven one, that means unseasonal flood. Recently, very, very recently, if you take India as a touchstone, or even commonly if you take Europe, Europe went through despite what happened in the Elbe Basin, which we'll be discussing, which is now a part of a lot of case studies, has become a touch point for various, references, decision-making points, even as recently as now, the eastern part of Belgium, Netherlands, the western part of, Germany were devastated by floods, which is completely unprecedented. And these are all developed or even, highly developed economies. So it is not a situation that you normally try to, associate with the third world or, developing, underdeveloped countries, something like that. So the action has completely changed because they already have flood control mechanisms. They already had or have in place well-tested, defenses to take care of such eventualities. And over and above that, today, there is something that all of us are facing, which has been sounded out 30, 40 years back. People have started talking about the ozone layer, the effect of greenhouse gases, the carbon, the CO2 buildup, which will, if not absorbed properly. So these are not new. None of them has been as if we have started learning about it only a couple of years back. So just like our pandemic situation, the manifestation of the issues are probably pushing the requirement to know about it. Once you know about it, how do you manage it as relevant to your banking? And therefore, today we are bringing it down to that. So climate-driven, risks are, today extreme weather, very closer home. Couple of normally in Chennai, from where I am now talking to all of you, have the privilege of talking to all of you. November is our northeast monsoon time. But northeast monsoon is something that we all welcome because we experienced extremely difficult summer before that. So it is more of a summer heat breaker and probably a pond filler, filling up the local ponds and water bodies so that our next cycle of water requirements are taken care of. It was something like as regular as that, as well expected in that. But what has happened now in the last 2 or 3 cycles of a 5-year cycle has now become a 6-year cycle, and so on and so forth. So 2009, then 2015, now as we speak, 2021 November. We have had floods, rain-caused floods, which are unprecedented. Unprecedented to the extent that whole rainfall happening within 1 month. That's almost 12 times, mathematically, it's a 12-fold, incremental thing. So no defenses that were built up earlier are going to take care of that unless you had estimated that sort of, downpour or water, catchment or whatever that's called technically, and then be able to cater to that. So obviously that is going to be our focus. We also spoke about lack of rains. We saw, a major part, of wildfires in California is not new. During dry weather, it's always, we have heard about it. We have heard about how, bravely the firefighters and other mechanisms have fought it. These are being almost legendary stories, right, from my childhood, right? But today what's happening there, the scale, the rapidness or the velocity, as they call it, is something that's not being able to be estimated, and therefore there are no defenses that can be built. So this is, as a banker, if you look at it, if you take even this visual in front of us, if you had funded the purchase of the truck as a part of your whatever fleet management or whatever, right? What is the effect of your lending? Or what is the effect of this fire on your lending? So all these questions would have to be dealt with, which is not as if it is new, but we'll discuss it. So today you can see, these data that is now being put together by various bodies are only showing, a huge growth, not even a, let's say, manageable rate of growth. So therefore, the ability to respond to that in time, possibly, even if we are catching up with what's happening in May, probably or September, is hitting you. The growth in September is already hitting you because your reaction time, your ability to put in defenses and all that are different. So global mapping has equally, showing us a problem of both dryness and wetness, all due to climate changes. So we'll look at climate changes in a greater requirement. So one of the greatest references is always our economic, World Economic Forum's, thought bodies, where it's now fairly regularly met for, looking at good practices, migrating good practices, looking at areas that are, requiring greater support than the other, and so on and so forth. And in their collective wisdom, they have come together to look at what is the greatest risk by likelihood. That means which is likely to happen more. And as you can see on the top of that list is extreme weather. And now in November, this is of course for the entire 2021, which probably will be running out in 3 weeks' time. But if you look at it, how correct this estimate was, in hindsight. I can tell you from the Chennai experience, and I'm sure there are many around us in this meeting will be able to reflect it to their own immediate, area. And they're saying, look at what's happening. And therefore, climate action, that is the second bucket they have chosen. Climate action, whatever we are planning to do or already implementing or may not be enough. And therefore, that can create a greater risk by itself. And the humans have not stopped. We all know we can't use, recyclable, unless we can recycle plastic, we can't use. But yet, production is continuing. Probably we are even giving them extra credit lines. We are certainly helping marketing by, consuming the product as individuals, if not by as organization. So all of them, in terms of likelihood, are estimated to be very high, and they are true. If this report came out in 2020, and at that point it was estimated for 21, and today we know these estimates are actually true. So much so that infectious disease, which in 2020 was probably raging across the world in greater intensity than till we had this friend Omicron visiting us, right? So till that time, in that environment, infectious disease was even the fourth most, risk point, right? That was happening. But when you look at the impact of, the same risks, the same body of, wise men put the infectious disease well ahead of impact. Why? Because your resources, your supply chain resources, and your market value chain resources are all going to get impacted, which will impact your bottom line. So climate change, the extreme weather that happened about a week back in Chennai, as we close, normally by the third week of November, the rains dissipate, the enough sufficient level of, winter setting is done, and we are all happy. But as we are talking today, we have a weather report that's saying that there's a impending, storm that may cross the coast and therefore will bring in another deluge. So even with such developments happening in, or unpredictability in the weather, extreme weather that's happening, that's the impact is fairly easy. Normal life has almost come to normalcy. It's only schools and colleges that are still closed because there is waterlogging in some areas. They don't want to expose the children and so on and so forth. So it's not as if the impact of an extreme weather, can be for a longer duration than the impact of an infectious disease. So these are, the metrics that are used typically in our regular risk management. So what is it that is going to be so special for climate risk? How do we understand that? Probably that will be the focus of our discussions for this evening. So if you look at what, in terms of the next 2 to 3 years, that worries the global leadership, business leadership, political leadership, thought leadership, the academia, and so on and so forth. The whole, the let's say the top people, right? They say extreme weather events are going to be at, the next 2 year, up to the 2 year horizon is going to be your biggest danger. But when it comes to impact, they slot the same, climate action failure or your impact of the extreme weather events and our ability to counter that, which is normally referred to as climate action required, and the failure of that not being effective or not being done at all in some cases, which can have a ramification for a longer horizon time period, 5 to 10 years. This is very important to understand this, because what can happen in the immediate, horizon in terms of impact, and how much, it can impact in terms of time frame where it can keep lingering. For example, arable land getting flooded out, could severely impact agricultural production, as all of us know. More importantly, even where there are sufficient buffer stocks and other defensive mechanisms or risk management mechanisms that have already been built up by the political leadership, or the governance, thought processes, the price fluctuations would, require a management where you may have to deal with the earlier estimations differently. So therefore, your, ability to consume, ability to distribute, ability to, actually manage the demand side. Demand can be very high, if, particularly when you need, your food. But ability to purchase could get very severely affected if the impact continues. And therefore, they will have to find out other means. So these are important indicators as to how we look at how climate associated risks are going to impact. The same thing can happen to you. Commodity prices, prices move up and down for various reasons, right from hoarding from the negative side, or you can call it to the left-hand side of the y-axis, to the positive side of, like this, transport bottleneck or, any other requirement. But recently, without any climate impact, Britain went through a major problem because of lack of truck drivers to, move the essential goods to their various delivery points. So there could be any amount, any number of causative, indices that can impact your distribution mechanism, which can result in your ability to manage the demand side, right? So this is going to be our discussion for the evening. So how do you even estimate what's going to happen? For that also they have already, given some indicators which we can use. For example, if you look at this particular graphic in front of you, the acute climatological event like a hurricane or, the heat wave, if you see what is the ability to anticipate this, that means the various data points that can be used to interpret and say, yes, in the next 3 weeks or next 3 months or whatever time horizon, you want to estimate what is going to happen. If you look at a hurricane today, you can actually estimate it in days' time, and even something like a heat wave, it's not very difficult, weeks time. But is your capability to respond to such an estimate, is matching to that, is where the question comes. This is provided you have the data, provided you have the data and you can analyze and interpret the data, and then, plan or even roll out your plans. So there are so many ifs. So one of the most important requirement here would be the data to understand this and, come to a conclusion at the ability to conclude what would be the action points that will be required. At this point, I would like to make a mention of Professor Sridhar Balasubramaniam of our IIT Bombay and his work on, demystifying the global, the weather and climatic, ability to read these indices. Most of us see, most of our, channels, TV channels and other data points, various reports on climate, even as school students, even at the very basic levels, we have looked at isobars and other, maps. But then, we have not taken those things so far to a greater degree of seriousness, where we would like to use that data to understand what type of climate risk are we, subject to or exposed to, so that how do we build it back into our risk management plan. So it would be useful to use, the academia, like what Dr. Subramaniam, Sridhar, Professor Balasubramaniam is already doing in IIT Bombay, where the entire science of looking at this data, where the data is available, how to look at the data, how to read those, graphs and maps that the various, bodies, research bodies or tracking bodies or other agencies like the meteorological department and so on and so forth. Today, there are a whole host of players that are, tracking and providing this information both commercially and even altruistically, completely free, right? But it's great to have it free, but if you don't know how to use the data, you are no better off than when, you don't know where to find the data. So therefore, it is in intervention of academicians like Dr. Professor Balasubramaniam, whose inputs are very important. So I request all leaders here, risk management aspirants, risk management leaders, to search for such knowledge sources and expose your teams to that, so that slow and steady, you will be able to build in the required, in-house, knowledge bank, because then that wouldn't be a gap in your management. So today, using such a technique, we already have a confidence level through these information in front of us, where even a hurricane can be, determined days. So if in a couple of days, even from the government point of view, they can evacuate people from low-lying areas which can get inundated. So risk management practices are, driven at the government or the social level. So therefore, if you know that your borrower is going to be in that level, you know what to do or how to manage it, or you may at least start planning. What if it is your own facility that is going to be under such an impact, so on and so forth. So these are the indicators that will come into play that we need to use, and we learn from that. So what are the various global risks that I've got, and what are the interconnected causative actions? As you can see, extreme weather, the green band that you can see in this particular graphic in front of you, that fellow is running up and down every other, connective. And in terms of the severity of the risk, which moves from left to right, you can see that the weather as a contributor or weather as an element of the various characteristics of the various risk categorization we do is going to be almost complete. There are actually very, very few risks that are not impacted by weather. So therefore, whether you're using weather itself as a driver, or weather is one of your elements for consideration in your risk management, we would like to now rethink those strategies in looking at whether we now need to look at climate risk itself as a separate, bucket of our focus, for our focus. So what are the contributors in terms of, what is contributing to this problem? All of us know CO2 emissions going up to the stratosphere or wherever, creating the various formation. All those technology, is neither my expertise nor is the agenda or the scope of this discussion. So both these contributions, if you come down to, data and what are the contributors to this particular requirement, you can see that it is the transportation sector that contributes most heavily. In fact, this is again nothing new. People from Delhi, knew what happened 20 years back, particularly when almost the entire public transport system was run on diesel and other lower level fuel based transportation. So the Delhi Metro, and in the last 20 years, as a what sort of a solution and what of an impact on the problem it has brought in, both are aware. All of us are aware of in terms of physical experiences and of course data interpretation and all that. So surface transport essentially today. Earlier we had about 3 cities in India which had public metro transportation. Mr. Gadkari is on record saying it is now 144 cities, tier 1, tier 2, and even tier 3 cities are now under various stages of implementation of their metro transportation. So slowly and steadily, probably the Delhi example will get replicated. Cochin is a glorious example, manifestation of the Delhi example. What happened was the public behavior of choosing. You can't have a metro system and not have it, not used at all. That's the problem in Chennai. If you look at the statistics, Chennai has got a beautiful metro system, but it's not used, right? So it had no impact except it had a cost impact. So you still had the metro system and people are using their private transportation. So surface transport is not only facilitation through various methods, it's also a change in public behavior that has to be driven. So change in public behavior, we have an example, glorious example of Delhi manifested now in Cochin, and we see the improvement in the air quality index, though this is a challengeable thing because of various other influences. Anyway, not going into that direction. So what are the other influencing or contributing points? Are your industry and power. Now, industry and power are the basic drivers of your economy. So therefore, what do you do? So if you look at what are the emission level contributors over the last 50, 70 odd years, whatever, this study says that it is your, coal, which is the gray belt, and the oil belt, which are the 2 contributors, main level of contributors. So if you connect surface transport, most of the surface transport, at least 80%, not even 80, I mean, I'm being very generous in saying 20% is non-fossil fuel based transport. I think in India, it's close to 90%. I don't know the exact data. I didn't look up because that's not our discussion. It's still fossil fuel driven, oil driven, transportation. And coal, which, powers the electricity, generation and industries that run on it, if not directly producing their own electricity, there is a huge dependency on that. And coal is abundantly available in India. So it's not going to go away easily. And that's possibly, which will again come to, the point of discussion at the later point of this discussion, is what probably prompted political leadership to say that we have to now push it back a couple of decades. Though whether right or wrong is neither am I qualified, nor is this, the platform to discuss that. So globally, to deal with these challenges, because you need oil, because you have a predominantly high or a very high level of fossil fuel dependency, and therefore what can be done to accept that situation while having a regulation that will progressively build up or bring down the buildup of the emissions coming out of it. So the safe vehicle rules, which from the earlier CAFE rules, is now planning to bring it down at an incremental rate of 1.5% from between the year 21, which we already crossed, to 26, which was possibly the COP 26 and other sort of this thing. So what is climate risk? Before we go to that, as we're talking about commercial thing, one of my friends in the insurance industry, a veteran, an insurance expert, Mr. Subramaniam, had recently penned an article on this proximate cause. Proximate cause is defined as the original cause that leads to a series of unbroken events, which finally leads to the current event. So in the insurance industry, possibly this is a very important usage. So I sort of try to use this and see how did it impact, how did banking contribute to the continuous growth or lack of managing the climate risk sort of thing. Which is possibly the proximate cause is our aggressive lending. In the last 50 years, lend more to, industries and whatever they did, whether they're using, polluting mechanism, or, they are having greening mechanism or whatever. Our focus was more on, business growth than its impact on the environment. Yes, there may be pockets of exceptions to this, but by general rule, it was our growth. Possibly, using the proximate cause analogy here, our own growth possibly is leading us to now, possibly slow down to think, or think now to see whether we need to look at it differently. And that would be the, focus on our discussion. So even as recently as September this month, we are now in December, right? About a couple of months back, in one of the discussions, the Deputy Governor of Reserve Bank of India, when he was invited to do the keynote address, has very clearly said that this is the biggest threat facing the humanity today. So he has gone beyond the realm of banking. He is talking about humanity, right? And he has used the basic definition relates to, when he tried to define the climate-related financial risk, on the risks that may arise not only from climate changes, but also from the mitigation, of these changes. So this is a part of our official definition itself, which we look at it. So there are basically, as a part of that definition, which also formed a part of his speech, was on the physical risk drivers. Physical risk drivers, which we normally directly observable as we started off this discussion, your floods, your anything that manifests, where right directly earlier as a childhood, in my childhood, I had rains in November. Nobody related to the climate. In fact, lack of or failure of the monsoon was the discussion. Today, the excessive monsoon we know is because of a climatic El Nino, whatever, that sort of thing. So physical risk drivers and the transition risk drivers, which are our, ability to manage the transition, to manage the mitigation, manage the, requirements, the behavioral requirements, whatever. So this was the focus of his discussion, or primarily large part of his discussion was focused on this. This was the Deputy Governor of your regulator in this country. Okay. And a lot of the ASEAN countries look up to us to be leaders in these things, particularly in banking. So therefore, it would be very, very useful and relevant for all friends from every geographical, area. So what was the overall definition? Potential risks that may arise from climate changes. That means not only risks that happen like in Chennai or, earlier in Germany and, Eastern Netherlands or wherever. Potential risks that may arise because of this, right? And your efforts to mitigate the change, including greening. If you're going to green more, of your land, probably you cannot allow a few type of industries to come in. So therefore, there is a risk because of that. Doing something and not doing something. Risks arise from both. So and their related impacts and the economic and financial consequences. Economic consequence and financial consequences. Financial consequences are immediate on your balance sheet, your revenue, all that stuff. Right? Economic could be long term. You're not, in fact, like any other what we call the growing disaster. Right? What you initially thought in a fire accident was only, one room that was gutted, and later on you find out you can't use the entire building. So economic consequences could be, as we dig deeper. So transition, physical risk is easier to identify, because we can relate to that. Transition risk is which represents the changes that could generate, increase or reduce the transition. Normally government policies, legislations, government policies, that we are going to continue with coal for some more time. That means your emission levels are not going to come down, and therefore you need to do probably less of those dependencies than more of them, and so on and so forth. So that policy transiting into your action plan, and therefore your ability to strategize or you're strategically, positioning your targets or your objectives or whatever, these are your transition risks that are going to come in. Technology today, in this sort of drastic impact areas. Earlier, we had disaster recovery as our biggest safety net. Control for any disruption. The largest control for any disruption. If you asked any technology or technology-oriented risk manager, he would tell you, simply put in a DR, ITDR or whatever for your disruption, so you are able to manage it. So right from data backup probably, real-time, synchronous, whatever we want to discuss about that, those changes in technology also is going to become a problem, because the way we have to, power those data centers. Recently, the government of Tamil Nadu, came about with its data center management policy. So apart from various other governance requirements, now a data center or a dependency on data center within this particular geographical jurisdiction, you will have to be compliant with that, and therefore the transition risk into that. Now this has come out only because, not because suddenly they realize data centers have to be protected. Therefore realize that data centers, by themselves and their dependencies create a problem in terms of in the event of a climate risk driven event, and so on and so forth. So customer sentiments. Today your supply chain disruption, customer, if he is able to sympathize with you, is going to, wait for you to recover so that he can respond to you or require from you. But what if it is more urgent, like medical services? So therefore, customer sentiment is going to have a great impact. Earlier, our marketing people told us that customer sentiment will be driven by, various positioning of the product and all that. But today it is also going to be driven by your climate and its impact, or climate risk and their impact. So we see that heterogenic factors, that can impact, because you can be working. I still remember a dialogue long time back as a part of my consulting assignment with a client who was based out of Bangalore, which is England, as most of the people who know the topography of South India know. Chennai is on the east coast of India, and Bangalore is about 300 kilometers inland towards the west, or northwest, or whatever, right? So the client was, this particular case study, the client was in Bangalore. So he said, listen, I'm not on the coastline, so if there is going to be a global, warming and the coastline are, going up by 5 meters, 3 meters, whatever, I'm not going to be affected. But he had a lot of, 60% of his revenue was being generated from the coastline-based industry. So when we pointed out saying that this is going to be your impact, your systems may be up and about, but your customer systems will not be available for you to generate that revenue. What will you do? So this amplifies the risk that he probably could have had, because they are on a particular coastline. They were port-based agencies. There were services, being rendered to certain upcoming ports in Kakinada, in Krishnapatnam, in Ennore, and so on and so forth. So these are amplifiers that can now come into your risk requirements. So climate risks are driven by both transition and physical risk. The transmission channels are normally your macroeconomic and microeconomic channels, geographical variations, the amplifiers, as we very briefly missed the thing, and the mitigants. Now the mitigation has to be happening at the client end if you want the continuity to happen, so that he has an alternate side to go for you to deliver service and therefore make your revenue estimations, functional. So the mitigants today are going to be driven by these things. Earlier, you would have expected the client to manage his own end. You're there, I deliver. If you're not there, I don't deliver. Now it's not that. If you don't have a client to deliver, probably you are not available anymore. So the financial impact that happens on your credit, your market, your liquidity, and your operational risk are very, very real. That's happening. So earlier, we were looking at these risks from a business objective horizon, requirement sort of a approach. Now we'll have to add another dimension, saying, apart from whatever A to Z, A to X probably I have done, then how can I build in Y and Z, which are climate and climate related impact. So what are the climate risk and commercial lending perspective? How would you look at it? We looked at the physical risk drivers. The transition risk drivers are also going to be through the same channel, through your households, your corporates, and your sovereigns. These are the three buckets you normally deal with in terms of commercial banking, your retail, your corporate, or your investment, or your non-corporate, or government banking, whatever, right? So your credit risk is always a problem. Whenever there is a change in the situation, the reaction is always going to be in terms of how the counterparty is responding to the situation. So that is what credit risk is all about. Most of us know about it. Some of us who are in the beginning stages, early stages of our career, will be certainly reading literature to understand more about credit risk. Credit risk, for the benefit of such, profile, people of that profile, beginners, credit risk is nothing but the risk associated with the inability of the counterparty to meet their obligation. Counterparty is who? The other party, other side. They have to repay, they have to, comply with a lot of terms and conditions of that particular engagement. Any one of these, when there is a, let's say, gap, if not a complete default, it can lead, if not directly resulting in a credit impairment. And therefore, credit risk is very simply defined as counterparty risk. To be colloquially defining it, we can say it is counterparty risk. Risk associated with counterparties' responses. Counterparties' responses is not a point in, is not a, cut in stone sort of a, chiseled in stone sort of a this thing. If he is going to be, let's say, rated in a particular manner, he's not going to be consistently having the same, characteristics defining the same risk. And therefore, this is as fluid as the entire credit engagement itself is. And it's now influenced by extraneous, apart from external factors, extraneous factors like credit risk. So what happens to the particular effect of credit risk, climate changes on credit risk, and the policies that drive that? One of the recent realization, when I say recent realization, I'm not saying in 1 or 2 years, over the last 10 to 15 years, have been the way to look at how to move at least personal transportation into an electric vehicle based transportation. Because in India, we have more than 200 million personal transportation vehicles. So therefore, the cumulative effect of all that emissions and other things, scientifically could be a large impact, which we saw in terms of our graphic on the contributors, right? And therefore they, and the reason that they are such contributors are because almost all of them are dependent on fossil fuel. As an aside, one of my friends was recently telling us in a discussion, the reason why, the fuel pricing is not coming down in India is, to nudge people to start thinking about, should I move out of using a fuel, fossil fuel based, transporter, whether it's a car or a, two-wheeler or whatever we all use, three-wheeler, whatever we all use, right? So, so even in adversity, people were able to look at certain, ray of hope. Even if that is true, it is a good strategy. I don't know whether it's a practical strategy because I still have to fill up my tank, but it's a good strategy. But the government of India has gone about talking about infrastructure creation, the subsidies for it. And one of the most interesting points I found in that policy was the scrapping policy of the aging vehicles. Even today, as you drive, when you see an older model of the car that you use and you see that driving in front of you, you are surprised that the owner is still driving that model, which you dumped a long time back because you didn't want to continue with a fuel inefficient vehicle or an outdated model, vanity or practicality, whatever was the driver. You quit that model, but you still see that fellow running on the road ahead of you. You wonder what would be the impact of cumulative such usages. So a scrapping policy is a very interesting policy that has come. It addresses two key things. One is, of course, the efficiency of the vehicle, all that stuff, which will contribute positively. More importantly, the recycling part of, climate management. It's called the indirect contributor, so that you don't have to again spend all the effort, particularly the power, all the other carbon or, carbon related inputs into production. So you reuse artifacts, after a particular thing. So there is a policy or a part of that policy which says that there will be recycling or scrapping valuation. So I was just thinking, which we'll talk about it in saying, whether if I were to design, today I'm a retired guy, if I were to design a product or a two-wheeler lending product or redesign my product, will I now look at the loan value, that is the cost of the asset minus, the buyer's margin. So the loan value net, I won't call it the loan value now, I'll call it the gross loan value minus the scrapping value, because I know by policy I'll get the scrap value. So can I now bring down the loan itself so that it will motivate more people to, move on to an electric vehicle instead of a fossil fuel vehicle, because that scrapping model doesn't exist, or the valuation for it doesn't exist for the fossil fuel vehicle. That is, you only get the metal value or whatever else, the scrap value. Here, the scrapping value has an added element of, bringing in a driver, an incentive that can make you scrap your vehicle at a particular aging profile of the vehicle. So fresher vehicles, latest technology, all of this could build or continue to sustain the levels of reduction in the overall emissions. So climate risk and its effect on credit risk will now start manifesting itself through such thought processes. Where such thought processes are already there, it will get validated through such policies. Where such policies are being implemented by a few leaders, let's say some of the leading private banks or public sector banks, and so that others who are waiting online to see what is happening there, or when their senior personnel move across, to other banks, they migrate those good practices so that the population or the pollination is very successful and large. So if you look at to understand what we have so far discussed just now, is fossil fuel has this, it's like your continuity cycle. I mean, you extract the fuel, you refine it, use it. For all of this, there is a, carbon commitment. And finally, when you deploy it into your actual use, whether through your, transportation or whatever else, right, there is still an emission that goes to affect or impact the climate change. So fossil fuel, though we are saying politically, we will continue using coal, there is going to be an emission, right? So there we cannot avoid it at all. There is no other way. Electrical, you look at some of the data that's available, there will be emissions, of course, but it's at the third. Current research says it is at a third of it. Because if you look at, between a gasoline-driven vehicle, with the same other things being equal, and even a hybrid vehicle, hybrid vehicle is somewhere between 50%. But if you look at a pure EV, it is almost at a third, and this is where the research or the academia at least says they are still, at nascent stages or not at advanced stage of research. So we can only expect better and better outcomes to come, which will impact the way the emissions come in. So therefore, your ability to look at, is this sustainable? Is this a product like a seasonal product? Or is it only for some particular, time span? Because most of us are driven by my balance sheet requirements. Is it going to affect my balance sheet? Not to complain, but that's the general approach that most of us take when we strategize or put strategies into action or whatever in the business. So therefore, studies like this give us a great comfort, a greater degree of comfort, saying, listen, this is only going to get better. So therefore, I'm taking a bet that will improve in odds than actually, even holding the odds. Even at current odds, probably I may not make enough money. So if the odds are going to deteriorate, I may actually land up losing money. But actually, here the odds can actually improve in your favor. So market risks are driven by stock, currencies, and commodity prices. All of us know those drivers. The beauty in this particular literature is, the literature itself goes to say there is no correlation. That means as of now, we don't see a climate change, greatly influencing the movement of commodity risk. If you look at onions in India, onions is a great commodity. Why? Because it can unseat the central government of the country. It's so powerful. Forget its culinary value. Forget its commodity value. It has got political value in India. So even that particular product, and it has a few well-defined production area. So therefore, the seasonality, in terms of its distribution, other things were always for various reasons. In one particular year, I still remember the Godavari was in floods, which is a major river in the southern part of India, where most of the production areas could not move because of the flooding, having cut off the supply chain channels. The trains, the trucks were all stranded. So the commodity could not be moved from storage area to consumption area. So the prices shot up. Demands, purely demand supply, driven impact. But that was not due to climate changes. So today, such changes, whether they are correlatable to a climate change, this literature itself tells you the correlation is either not available, or where they are not strong enough to conclusively decide that these are the primary drivers and not one of the many drivers. So it is more evolving. We need to contribute in terms of our ability to track, our portfolio holding, our industry portfolio study, in terms of bodies like Risk Management Association of India, the Indian Bankers Association, or the regulator himself, and so on and so forth, right? We need to contribute to those studies so that this position of seeing whether there is a correlation or not, whether there are causative events, how do you then identify, if not completely ring fence those causative events, and so on and so forth. So while we know that there is no platform here to discuss, we know that there is an opportunity for us to contribute for such discussions for future, deliberations of this nature. Liquidity risk. This is a very interesting requirement. Liquidity risk is our ability to be liquid. Most of us know, asset valuation, counterparty behavior. One very important indicator that arose in Florida has now got almost, replicated everywhere else. What was that happened in Florida was, this is well known. I mean, this is not a case study that I'm quoting separate. I'm just quoting from literature that's already available openly. Most of you would already know it. But for some of you who did not know it, particularly from the source is McKinsey, Academy, Global Institute. What was particularly important about that Florida example was the valuation that happened between the areas that were affected, and there are certain areas in Florida that's completely blind. What we call, rain shadow region, they are hurricane shadow region, which the hurricanes don't affect at all. The key is in other areas, So the ability to look at the, valuation because of the climate or the requirement of impairment and other things was very distinctly adopted, and therefore the need for liquidity to manage such positions are actual manifestations of such eventualities, was very distinct. And this is not only Florida, as we will see, it has been repeated now in 2013, the Elbe Valley or the Elbe Basin, Elbe River Basin in Germany, at the granular level, banks started making provisions differently, the ability to keep liquidity requirements separate for affected area, and parts of basins or parts of their operations or parts of their client counterparty operations that were in the unaffected part of the basin, river basin, to this extent, granular liquidity requirement management has already crept in, and those are very good case studies for us to read and learn from, to look at whether we would try to do, instead of just using, one size fit all, even if it were to be granular for your own organization. Would you now want to further break it down to a level where you can now identify, probably South of India is more prone to, climatic risk, North of India probably to seasonal risk, something like this. I'm not, in the thick of things in terms of being a part of strategic discussions, but many of you are aspirants, potential contributors to that. So you would want to think through that and then see which is the best way to do it, possibly roll out a few thought processes into action to see if it can work, and then work with the regulators to see whether that is regulatory compliant. So liquidity risk being managed through identification of climate risks and the impact of such, risk factors or risk drivers and their, the impact areas being ring-fenced for specific strategy creation, strategy development, and strategy implementation would be possibly the way ahead in managing liquidity risk. Operational risk. Operational risk is fairly well easy to understand, and therefore, honestly, because of this, nobody understands, or they think that they already understand, because right in front of you and becomes the elephant in the room, right? Nobody identifies it, but they are physical. If your client is affected, most probably in the same area, your entire operation is affected. If, let's say, Tamil Nadu is affected, for a bank that is based in Bombay, all their 100 branches or whatever, would be affected in one way or the other, or at least the customers of the 100 branches would get affected, and therefore there will be an impact. When the COVID area, impact started, we all realized one of the assignments that I did first post-COVID was, one particular branch of a particular bank had 32 clients. All the 32 clients were in hospital, admitted for COVID, without any idea as to whether they will come out of the hospital alive or otherwise. So they wanted me to help their branch staff or the regional staff or whatever else assess the situation, find out, because nobody could travel, find out what sort of assistance could be given, or directional value, and so on and so forth. This was the role. Very fluid, but very important. But this is the way things are going to happen in terms of your impact being so localized. Now, COVID had affected entire India, entire globe by the time. But yet we are talking about a particular pocket where one branch had 32 customers, all of them, admitted to the various health, facilities. So to this extent, operational risk will become granular. Is it only that particular data center? If you have a, data center managing a hub of your ATMs, and that is in the probably affected zone, affected region, probably you would now want to look at how your, network is going to work, or your backup is going to work, or your, rerouting and other things are going to work. I'm just using a normal, thought process chain to discuss this. So physical risk drivers, there was a point in time where you thought if you are affected, your customers are also affected. That is not true anymore, because you may be affected, your customers may be affected, but your head office may not be affected. So still your fiduciary responsibilities, your financial obligations would still have to be, rolled out, met in their various ways. So therefore, operational risk, if this is not managed properly, it is going to manifest itself into a reputational risk of the organization. People are certainly going to escalate, or their, issues. Another classic case study here is again from the insurance industry, where the entire family perished in a particular, unfortunately perished in an accident. So who are the claimants of the insurance benefits? Issues like this will have to be managed when you're talking about, how do you identify, how do you look at those risks, and then how do you plan your responses to such risks, that if they manifest, what will happen? So very quickly, trying to summarize what we have discussed so far. Credit risk increases if the borrower is not able to repay. He may not be there, like in the hospital scenario, or his factory could have got inundated, or his supply chain could have got, completely wiped away, like the onion story, right? All of this is going to affect his ability to, meet his commitments to you, and therefore you are going to have a risk, right? Market risk, financial asset values, particularly like what we're talking about. Is it going to be particularly because it is isolated, or is it a larger normal, issue? Normally what we talk about, macroeconomic indicators for your interest rate risk, for your, exchange rate from your trade balances and other requirements we normally track, right? Liquidity risk, right? Ability to source funds. So in the event of your ability, or in the event of your potential inability of sourcing funds, you may possibly have different liquidity requirements for that, right? And so on and so forth. Operational risk, increasing your ability to respond. You probably, in this point, probably we need to talk about these loss event, factors of Basel. By and large, we have now clubbed everything into, 7 events. I can tell you from my own experience earlier, before Basel came in, I was working in an MNC bank, a British bank, where we had about 40 odd categories. So which we had to scramble to put them together into the Basel buckets, as it was called those days. Because we had a far granular level of identifying events. So probably we'll go back to something like that, so that we're able to identify or ring-fence them and then manage them according to the categorization, our ability to manage such categories. And reputational risk is, whether it is climate driven, no customer is going to, take you or give you the leeway, because basically he needs to survive, and probably he needs your bank to help him, and he's not going to wait for your bank. If we are not able to respond to his needs or sentiments, as you can call it, we are in the risk of running a lesser market share. Now, this could have happened even normally. The only difference is the reason he has lost, or the causes for the change in his sentiments, are climate driven. So borrower's behavior is going to be today, as it is, we have a lot of challenges with certain, changes in the borrower behavior profile over, if you take it as a decade, sort of behavior data points, there are significant changes in the borrower behavior profile for different type of products for the same parameters in the same demographic, influences. So borrower behavior that was happening for various other influences, other variables, as we call it normally in our data analysis, has now, bring in a bigger variable. Okay, is there going to be a driver called climate changes that are going to influence it? The answer seems to be yes, from what we have discussed so far. Right? The climate change, because it's a real impact on their environment. Therefore the environment in which they are planning their own or strategizing their own survival, growth, aspirations, whatever. Right? So therefore the impact, whether it is going to happen or not, is possibly not a great deal to discuss. But whether it is going to be negative, whether that will impact, negatively impact his ability to deal with the bank. So those indicators will have to be tracked. And if they are tracked, well, how do we react to that? In my days, 40 years back, banking was fairly simple in the sense you had a borrower, you owned the borrower. When you were transferred, you handed over the entire file. Most of them, took 2 or 3 days to explain who the borrower was, introduce them, and so on and so forth. You had portfolios of 20, 30 accounts, and so on and so forth. Today, most of us, the sourcing team is different, the processing team is different for a asset book, and the final, relationship managers possibly, have a different type of. In this sort of a, let's say, model, how do you know what will be the impact on that? So we need to possibly build in those mechanisms to track any changes that can happen to the sentiments of the borrower behavior. Let's say this is already there in some of the most advanced or, more advanced bank as institutions. So you need to now see whether your checklist has climate driven inputs or variables that can be impacted because of climate results. So tracking that, and then whether we can respond according to that tracking indicators, what are the drivers, and therefore what would be the mitigant or possible or successful mitigants that can be deployed. So this is the way we will have to approach our borrower behavior and the impact of borrower behavior on our credit book. So a quick recap on the Elbe River Basin disaster that was in 2013. You will see this case study in a lot of literature, right? Now, why is this a very important case study to discuss? it happened in a developed country. That means, why do you say it happened in a developed country? If you see all the countries there, Germany, Poland, the Czech Republic, Austria, sorry, I beg your pardon, Austria, all of them had excellent, flood mitigation, flood management, river traffic management. All of them were not as if they were, evolving. They are highly advanced, and yet the impact of it was disastrous when the river, went into a deluge and all that, right? Now, what was very significant here was one part significantly, so let's say the right-hand side and the left-hand side, of the data, the left-hand side had no impact at all, or what was called the high ground had no impact at all, and the low ground had all its impact. And the way the financial institutions reacted to this was significant. They didn't have the benefit of the discussion that we are having right now, because they didn't have a model earlier to discuss. Today, we can draw from the model because we have this model, the data collected from it, the impact of that. It's almost 7 to 8 years of various levels of impact or manifestation of their decisions, which are either proving what they did was right or what they could have done better, right? So these are very important requirement to look at. Important case studies to look at how to adjust our such disaster-prone areas that can get affected. So let's, for example, use this Ganges plain as a requirement in India. So if we can develop liquidity requirement for Ganges plain, between the northern bank and the southern bank or whatever, and therefore it runs through 3 or 4 regions. Therefore, how do I look at my North India or Central India liquidity management, so on and so forth, operational risk management, and so on and so forth. So this particular case study allows us to either validate our thinking or initiate our thinking on how do we identify our areas of operation. So if you are a bank that is based only in Tamil Nadu, your Ganges basin, example may be more of an academic input because you may not be present there. So what are your actions and how are they going to cascade on customers? Like everything else, the government action cascades on you, cascades on the customer. Your actions cascade on the customer. Customers' actions cascade on all of us. Customers who don't repay. Customers who go to a holiday destination and don't return. All these are customer actions, that behavior that impact your credit profile. So therefore, bankers' action that can trigger, if not actually manifest itself into customer behavior, will be discussed. So for that, the best way is to have your climate risk management very clearly identified. And we are not without help here. In fact, the BIS itself has, the Bank of International Settlement, all of us know, the BCBS and all, have already floated down a consultative document on your climate-related financial risk. I recommend that all of you please go through this document, D530. What I have done is, just call out its various principles. It's split its entire, it's structured its entire, approach on 18 principles. 12 of them are to individual banks, commercial banks. From clause 13 or principle 13 to 18, they are to the regulators. So if we have any participants from regulatory bodies like SEBI, RBI, they would be more, focusing on those. And since we are anyway signatories to the BIS Accord and other, Basel Capital Adequacy Accord and the G20 movement, G7 now, right? Our regulators are bound to adopt, and there are significant room for, such adaptation being customized for your local requirements. What is required in India may be different for Japan, may be different for Australia, whatever, right? So the regulators have significant room for bringing in the local flavor, as it were, right? So climate risk is a financial risk, whether it is for you or your customer, and it is going to certainly affect your revenue, right? Your expenditures are going to be increasing. Any mitigation is going to be a cost. and benefit probably will be realized, over a period of time, because not all cost benefit analysis tell you that the benefit will be like your plumbing, that you repair a wall that is not working, you change the wall, and lo and behold, everything is hunky-dory. Wish everything in life were like that, but the cost of the wall would be immediate. The water flow will probably improve over a period of time. So your benefit realization could be, phased over a larger time horizon than your expenditure requirement. In fact, you could even have a recurring expenditure horizon. In 2004 tsunami, the village in Japan, which is again another case study, found out that their permanent mitigant actually became a recurring mitigant, because they had to, maintain that particular defense after that particular 2004 tsunami, which affected all of us through. So therefore, the impact of these things on your assets and liabilities and your ability to, capital, bring in capital, source additional capital, all of these are going to get impacted as any other requirement would be. There is a lot of reading material in this. I have given you the hyperlink to that for your reference. So what are the risks that again we can just put together what we discussed so far? Carbon pricing and reporting obligations. Reporting obligations today are now increasingly becoming very focused. Everybody wants to know about what you have done about climate, risk management. Everybody wants to know all the 360 degrees around you. Your own staff members want to know about it. Your own regulators obviously want to know about it. The investor group, they want to know about it before they look at whether you are a potentially good or not so good, candidate. So these are now becoming imposed. Carbon pricing is a separate subject to be discussed. Carbon pricing is a conversion of your various actions at a very simple level, which, pardon me for that, but that's not the scope of this discussion, right? Then mandates and regulation of existing products, because your new products you can look at, the changes. What about your existing portfolio? We'll talk about that. Then technology, how does it come into it? Then market, how it is changing the customer behavior, and your reputation as an outcome. So you have the physical risks, actually acute risk, like what happened in Germany, even recently, and in some parts of, southern India. And chronic is where it is going to persistently keep changing. Now, if you look at what has happened in the last, what is called the El Nino effect on the northeast monsoon in India, southern part of India, it was earlier having a 6-year cycle. I don't know, it is for Professor Balasubramaniam and other academic, experts like them to quantify whether this cycle is going to repeat itself or what is going to happen, so that we know how chronic is this particular pattern, and therefore, what would be the impact that can happen, what is the recovery period that I can set for myself, reasonably correctly, and so on and so forth. So opportunities, like every threat, in London, if it starts raining, you can be sure there will be somebody selling an umbrella across the corner, right? There will always an opportunity. Well, rain is a very, wet experience. The opportunities for the guy to go sell an umbrella there. So resource efficiencies are going to increasingly going to be manifest itself, right? This is very important to recycling plants, recycling processes, recycling management is going to become a separate, probably an industry, if not already one, right? Then water, and most of the microfinance institutions, friends from that particular thing, already know that there are, commercial products for, daily consumption usage, like water, sanitary requirements, sanitation requirements, and so on and so forth. So that individual family unit level of sanitation, can be improved, and therefore collectively at the, village or whatever community level, and therefore at the population, group level. So these are efficiencies that will be brought in. Energy sources will completely change. A lot of literature here to look at how renewable energy, like all of us know, wind, solar, and all that. the biggest challenges, what are the challenges, and therefore what are the impact of such challenges on ecosystem and environmental damage and so on and so forth. So each one of these opportunities, the build up as you tap it or you go into tapping it, the ability to build up a resilience so that the cycle, if not completely flattened, can at least be, made longer so that the impact on your businesses, if not for future generation, right, are at least lesser, or you can spread the impact over a longer duration. So this is what, you put your risks and opportunities together to look at strategic planning, which will bring in your financial impacts on through your revenues, expenditures, and all that. So how do you manage it? We are running out of time, so I'll quickly wrap it up. We are anyway in the last few stages. As you see, physical, acute, and chronic, which we discussed, transition drivers, which are your government policies, technological changes, customer investment sentiment, which is on your left-hand side. And the transmission channels are always microeconomic and macroeconomic channels. And the variability or the variances that are very, very, manifest in that is always the heterogeneity. If they are homogeneous, it's very easy. You can have one size fits all approach. It is not. The amplifiers can be sudden, can be different, and therefore the mitigants will also be correspondingly different. And as commercial bankers, we know the 4 buckets of risk, if not more, and the Basel framework that will have to be adapted to bring in the management of that. So what we are actually doing is to now use the risk management, practices that we already have. Today, even in most developed economies, they are already transiting between, 2 to 3, if not from 3 to 4. Basel, to 2.5 as everybody was now almost comfortable. There's a lot of experience in Africa. I can tell you, even banks in Africa are fairly well advanced into the Basel framework adoption. So we are now only looking, at the ability to include, or our ability to understand what to include for the climate risk, element of that management. So when you look at climate-related financial risk and the various risk management approach, obviously risk identification, exposure mapping, and quantification are your thing. And what are the methods that will allow you to do it is your conceptual consideration. The data needs for that. You have some challenges in, some of the data itself not being fully evolved, like what we saw. And risk classification. What type of classifications can you use? Do you adopt the existing classification, or do you prepare a new bucket? And therefore, if you did something for your own organization, then you would need to know how to map it for reporting regulations. Because regulatory reporting would not be separate for one type of bank and separate for a different type of bank, at least within the same geography. So therefore, how do you then look at the classifications at least being sub-classifications, if not separate classifications? So economic impact modeling, by itself, even where data is available completely, is, a very risky proposition. That is why we have model risk management, right? But lack of data itself does not give you a major problem. There are any amount of simulations and technologies, techniques that you can use, and therefore economic impact modeling would probably be more dependent on such techniques and technology. And forward-looking assessment, because while we look at all past data, right, like any other statistical set of data, past is no indicator of future, but past is an essential part of assessing future. So forward-looking assessment. Now, when I was, looking at this, the first thought that always comes to my mind is this not what we do for our stress testing? Is this not what we do when we do a stress testing on our own portfolios or buckets to see whether how the bucket would, the existing portfolio would react to more than one multivariate change or a single variable change or whatever variates, changes we do, which we call stress testing. Some of the stress testing is even prescriptive stress testing. In India, for example, stress testing requirement of the regulator is even prescriptive. He has even told you what are the various variants or variables that you have to change, to what extent. right? And then produce the results. So is this not the same thing? That was a question. Now this question is not mine alone. It has been sufficiently well answered. Look at this. So what is the difference between your macroeconomic stress testing that you do and the climate related risk, risk assessment you do? The scope itself changes. The scope of the macroeconomic stress testing is to see what would be the impact of such, stresses that you introduce through changing the variables on your balance sheet. Now, it is not on, your balance sheet alone. It actually goes much beyond in terms of climate related. Similarly, time frame. Time frame was very clear. Your variables, indicate the indices that you used were for a particular time frame. Here it is over a completely, let's say, very long period of time, especially when you look at, acute or even chronic assessment, chronic physical drivers. You need to probably look at, even in Chennai, when I was explaining to you, 2009, 2015, 2021 seems to be making a 6-year cycle identical. But that's because I did not look before 2009. What if before 2009 it was only 2001? So how did an 8-year cycle become a 6-year cycle? So what are the causative actions and so on and so forth? So the way we look at the data would change. The current use is basically for your regulatory requirement, because your regulator wants to know whether there is a systemic risk that is, sitting in his entire portfolio. He is worried about all the 41, 51 banks under his purview. While you are worried only about your particular business, probably we are even siloed within our particular region, whatever, right? So the current use is more for a regulatory concern kind of context in your stress testing, whereas here it's to understand whether such a product that you are trying to float is even going to make sense after 3 years. So even if you make money in the initial stages, you could possibly, the climate related sources could possibly wipe you out or whatever. So we look at it from different perspectives, right? From scope, the time frame, from the use of the assessment, exercises. So how do we fine tune ourselves? We carefully study the environment. What is the environment? Environment is not as in the climate environment, as in the regulatory environment, the legislative environment. One utterance such like that. One such utterance was by our Prime Minister in the, COP26 now, where he said India cannot maintain it at 2050 because net carbon emissions, when you say net zero, whatever you emit, you're going to build in or reduce the emissions and build in enough absorption capacity so that your net, emissions are net zero, right? And therefore it has got pushed back by another 2 decades. Now, what is this going to mean at the ground level to us, to you and me and others, is the policy changes will, start manifesting itself. So therefore, course corrections, if you had earlier got some policies set on your Paris declarations, now your Glasgow declarations possibly are going to impact such, policies, and the course corrections would be required. So what are we all doing about it? If you even go from your, the Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, definition of defining that this is the defining moment where we are all changing. You can't avoid it anymore. Very importantly, the recent, magazine, House magazine of the directors, organization, Institute of Directors India, they have a separate issue brought out, this November issue, which came about on the, day before yesterday, 2nd of December, on climate change. A separate issue. Now, this is a body of all company directors, fellows who are either already in the board of various entities or people who are aspiring to be there. So these are strategy drivers, strategy makers, and these guys have us exposed to this separate or a special edition on climate change. And to quote from the president's desk, he says this is the biggest challenge that is facing our lifetime. And, it does not face any border bias. It does not face any border bias. Pandemic, could easily jump across the border from Firozpur to the village on the other side, and so on and so forth. So, what did he say? We'll have to find out, how do you look at renewables for electricity generation, power, water, because your health is going to be important, and therefore low emission energy efficient technology, whether it is transportation, your production technology, or whatever else uses, power which, lets out emissions, what is going to help. Luckily, SEBI is working on a sustainability reporting framework. So now when SEBI is working on it, slightly different from RBI, because RBI is only focused on, Reserve Bank of India is focused on the banking industry. SEBI is for everybody. So therefore, it will cover your customer also, your client also, your counterparty also. Now this entire issue is available on this through this particular hyperlink. I strongly recommend all participants here to try and read this very, very good issue. And it has a lot of interesting articles that will further your knowledge on climate change and related, learning. And one way is to build climate resilience. Climate resilience, again, like organizational resilience, there are different, different literature gives you different type of definitions, but all of them are focused on the same objective. But here what they've done is they've given you a framework, and they've said it is called the 3 A's framework, where the framework includes the anticipatory capacity, adaptive capacity, and absorptive capacity. Anticipatory capacity is possibly what we all discussed so far. How do you assess the risk? How do you assess the risk of climate changes? Anticipatory claim. Adaptive is how do you bring it back into your businesses, your responses, your mitigations, and your ability to absorb them, right? And therefore, the entire transformation can happen. So once climate resilience becomes a part of your DNA, a part of your actions, then possibly your organization will be more climate resistant or climate risk resistant than the others. So my suggestion is, please look at your existing portfolio. How sensitive is your current, existing portfolio to climatic trends? Because the existing portfolio could be a manifestation before we all wore the climate risk hat. It could be just our business hat that was driving our portfolio. Now can we put the climate flavor on top of it and see how is this going to behave? If you're not already done it, consider whether it is possible to do it, right? And you want to look at near-term existing climatic conditions. You may want to refer to a whole host of literature. Like one of the leads I gave you is talking to Dr. Balasubramaniam of IIT Bombay. This gentleman is doing a lot of work, probably will democratize the learning of, climatic conditions and its interpretations, so much so that will become a nation full of bankers who are fairly good at climate conditions readers, right? But it will be very important for you to look at it and see how you can apply the real term, near-term learning on your portfolio. And then look at long-term requirements, whether you can develop products for that. Then how can you fine-tune your products for climate risk? And then look at your own resource mapping. Are your people well qualified? Do they have the basic training? That all of you are interested in improving your knowledge is fairly well, manifest that you are here today. You thought that this is a very important, point of learning, and that itself is a very good starting point, if not a different point on your curve. So build on top of it. Resource level mapping of your teams, your own self, your organization is very important, and contribute towards developing it. And finally, look at delegation of authority, role play, because certain reactions to your portfolio cannot be in your normal approval chains or approval value chain. So you may have to design a delegation methodology to deal with something akin to our emergency, responses, sort of a thing. So therefore, your course correction should be at strategic, which will flow into your tactical and functional levels. So resilience initiatives, banks should look at the bank level, look at whether can we deliver it to any situation. We are now looking at, virtual banks. Our Prime Minister is on record today having said in a few years we'll have digital banks which don't have presence anywhere. Now, if you can have digital banks, what about digital customers? So whether you can deliver in any situation. Then data management. Much has been said about this, so we're not going to go in much into it, but resilience is going to come if you can manage your data very well, irrespective of what is happening around you, above you, or in the riverbank next to you, right? Then how do you incorporate the lessons learned in the pandemic situation into your climate risk requirement? Today, we have a whole host of, at the granular level, at the organizational level, we have a whole host of lessons learned, learning lessons, captured, which can be utilized in certain situations. So these are resilience initiatives that you can take, but these are driven by, your willingness to adapt. I'm talking about the organizational level. Since you are going to be at senior level, if you are not already there, you need to look at whether you're willing to adapt, whether you're willing to invest in the required message, whether it is training your people, investing in technology, looking at dumping a product because it's, not future ready or climate risk ready, whatever. All these cost investments. Then whether you can do introspection. Earlier we were only looking at, reviews. Now you'll have to take it to a different level. You'll have to do an introspection. You can't just rely on assurances. Your third line of defense, even in the revised third line of defense, is going to be a tool and not an end. It's only a means. So you'll have to bring in a great deal of introspection. Your board or your senior management meetings would have a different type of an agenda now to look at your way to look at your willingness. And then you need to see whether you're going to be the trendsetter or the trend follower. It's not bad to be a trend follower if you're following the correct trend. So even if you're a trend follower, not a problem. Please make sure you're following the correct trend, or you could be walking down the wrong path. So with these few words, I've taken about 5 minutes extra. I apologize for that. This is not my intention, but I am open to questions, answers. I will move out of the full screen presentation so that I can look at the chat box. Hello.
Yes. So if anybody has any question, they can put in the chat box, and I'm allowing few persons who had raised hand for speaking, so they can just log in. So do we have any questions from the participants?
Rakeshji, if they can send emails also, we can answer them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, since we are not having any questions currently, so we will close the session. So thanks a lot, Mr. Sridhar, for an excellent session. And I think 1.5 hours is very limited to explain this complex topic, and even it will need a series of recurring sessions to go into deep.
Yes, sir.
I think there is one request from the participant. Just check it.
Ji.
Yeah, there is a question from Mr. Kunal. Can we consider stressing sovereign default rates for climate risk?
It's a good question. Actually, I thought you would have considered sovereign, climate risk for sovereign exposure itself. So even for exposures made already, if there has been a change in the, let's say, the impact or the assessment reveals that the current climate changes could be severe, then possibly, yes, what you need to look at in terms of haircuts to recover or provisioning to mitigate a potential impairment, whatever, will have to be definitely used. It's a very good question, Mr. Adukia.
So, do we have any more questions before we close the session? Mr. Vardhaman, I think he was trying to ask something.
Ji.
You can just type it in on the chat box.
You're welcome, sir.
I think since no more questions are coming, so we will close the session today. So thanks again, Mr. Sridhar. I think we should again come back with a similar session on maybe on a more detailed note.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes in future.
Yes,
and
sir.
we will cover the subject in detail. So thank you, Mr. Sridhar. Thanks all participants for joining. And for updates, you can also visit our website, rmaindia.org, where we keep on updating all the details. So thanks, and we shall be back again with some other topics soon. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you, sir.
everyone.
Thank you for the opportunity.